How long has it been since you allowed yourself a piece of chocolate without feeling guilty about it? If you've been living with prediabetes or type 2 diabetes, I'd guess it's been years. And I want to tell you something that may genuinely shift how you look at this disease. The advice you were given, that chocolate is the enemy of your blood sugar, is not just outdated. In some cases, it has cost you a tool that could have helped you all along. There is a form of chocolate on your grocery store shelf with a glycemic index of just 22. That is less than 1/3 of white bread. It contains compounds documented in peer-reviewed clinical studies to improve insulin sensitivity, lower the inflammatory markers that keep diabetes burning forward, and even support the regeneration of the cells in your pancreas that actually produce insulin. The difference between this chocolate and the one harming you is sitting on every label, waiting 30 seconds for you to read it. Today, I'm going to walk you through 5 specific types of chocolate that the evidence supports for people managing blood sugar. And pay close attention to number 5. It is the cheapest option of the 5, and it carries the strongest clinical evidence of all. Before I begin, do me a favor. Tell me in the comments how old you are and how long it's been since you turned down a piece of chocolate because you were afraid of your blood sugar. I read every comment, and your answers genuinely help me understand who's sitting with me today. Now, before I name a single one of those 5 types, I have to give you something that almost no article about chocolate and diabetes ever bothers to explain. Because if you don't understand this part, the 5 types I'm about to share will feel arbitrary, like a random list. Once you understand it, every single one will make complete biochemical sense. Here is the truth that most people miss. The benefit is not in chocolate. The benefit is in cacao. Those are 2 very different things. A mass-produced milk chocolate bar, packed with sugar, hydrogenated vegetable oil, and barely any real cacao, has almost nothing in common with the cacao bean itself, except a vague flavor. The healing compounds live in the cacao. The industrial bar simply borrows its name. Cacao contains a concentrated group of plant compounds called flavonoids, and the 2 that matter most for your blood sugar are catechin and epicatechin. These have 3 mechanisms that work directly on the disease you and I are trying to manage. The first is improving insulin sensitivity by repairing the lining of your blood vessels. I want you to picture insulin resistance like a phone line full of static. Insulin is calling. Glucose is waiting at your cells, ready to come inside. But the cell can't hear the signal clearly anymore. Cacao flavonoids work on that lining, the endothelium, and they help clear the static so your cells can finally receive the message. The second is reducing oxidative stress. Cacao sits among the highest-ranking foods ever measured for antioxidant capacity, and oxidative stress is not some abstract concept. It is one of the central reasons your insulin receptors stop functioning properly. Bring oxidative stress down, and those receptors start working again. The third mechanism is the one that genuinely changed how I think about this food. Epicatechin, the most abundant flavonoid in cacao, has been shown in cellular studies to stimulate insulin secretion and support the regeneration of the beta cells in your pancreas. Those are the cells that actually produce insulin. And in type 2 diabetes, they slowly get worn down and destroyed. The idea that a food compound could help bring those cells back rather than just compensate for losing them is a different conversation entirely. So when I rank these next 5 types, I'm not picking favorites. I'm ranking them by how much flavonoid they deliver and how strong the clinical evidence sits behind each one. Let me start with the easiest one to bring into your kitchen tonight. Number 1 is dark chocolate with at least 70% cacao. I put this first not because it's the most powerful, but because it's the most realistic place for most of my patients to begin. The flavor is firm, but still enjoyable. You can find it in any grocery store in America, Britain, or Canada. And the science behind it is solid enough that I have no hesitation putting it in your kitchen tonight. Let me give you the numbers. 70% dark chocolate has a glycemic index of around 22. To put that in perspective, table sugar sits at 65. White bread is around 71. So a square of good dark chocolate produces a slow, gentle rise in blood sugar, not the sharp spike most people assume. The reason is simple. At 70% cacao, there is far less sugar in the bar, and what remains is balanced by cacao fat and cacao fiber. Both slow down digestion. The fiber delays how quickly your stomach empties. The fat slows how fast any sugar present reaches the absorptive surface of your small intestine. Your body just doesn't see a sudden flood of glucose. Let me tell you about Margaret. She came to my office at 64 with a fresh pre-diabetes diagnosis and an A1C of 6.1. She lived alone, and for years she'd been eating 3 or 4 pieces of milk chocolate every night after dinner. She called it her reward, and she felt guilty about every single piece. I didn't tell her to stop. I told her to switch. 2 squares of 70% dark chocolate, eaten after a dinner with protein and fiber. 3 months later, her A1C was 5.7. But the part that mattered most to her was different. She told me she'd stopped hiding chocolate in her kitchen drawer. Research published in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition has found that regular cacao consumption is linked to reduced cardiovascular risk. That matters enormously for you because diabetes already doubles or quadruples your risk of heart disease. A clinically supported portion is about 20 to 30 grams per day, which is 2 or 3 small squares. Now, here is the label trap. Many bars sold as dark chocolate or 70% cacao actually list sugar as the first ingredient on the back. The front of the package is marketing. The ingredient list is the truth. Flip the bar over. Cacao mass or cacao paste must be the first word on that list. If sugar comes first, the bar is not what the front claims, no matter how dark it looks. Number 2 is dark chocolate with 85% cacao or higher. And I want to be careful here, because at first glance, this looks like just a stronger version of number 1. It is not. The clinical evidence behind 85% and above is a different conversation entirely. Here's why. As cacao percentage climbs, 2 things happen at the same time. The flavonoid concentration rises substantially, and the sugar content drops from around 20 to 25 grams per 100 grams down to roughly 10 to 14. You are getting more of the medicine and less of the problem in the very same bite. Now let me show you the study I want every diabetic patient to know about. A clinical trial looked at chocolate with 83% cacao in 60 non-smoking patients with type 2 diabetes and high blood pressure, ages 35 to 70. Each person consumed 25 grams a day, containing 450 milligrams of flavonoids, for 8 weeks. The results were striking. Their lipid profiles improved. And 3 of the most important inflammatory markers in diabetes, CRP, interleukin-6, and TNF-alpha, dropped significantly. I want you to understand why this matters. These 3 markers are not just numbers on a report. They are the 3 lieutenants of chronic low-grade inflammation, and chronic inflammation is the silent fire that keeps insulin resistance burning year after year. When you lower CRP, you are turning down the heat on that fire. You are addressing the cause of the disease, not just chasing the symptom. There's more. 2 large Swedish studies found that increasing dark chocolate consumption to at least 50 grams per week reduced stroke risk, both ischemic and hemorrhagic, by up to 27%. For someone over 60 with diabetes, whose stroke risk is already much higher than the general population, that is not a minor footnote. That is direct protection of the brain. Now, before I go on, let me ask you something personally. What was your most recent A1C number? And has any doctor ever sat you down and really explained how chronic inflammation drives your diabetes forward year after year? Tell me in the comments. I read every answer, and it helps me decide what to cover next on this channel. A practical portion of 85% chocolate is 20 to 25 grams per day. And one of the quiet advantages of going to this percentage is that the flavor is so much more intense and so much less sweet, you naturally stop after 1 or 2 squares. Your taste buds get satisfied before the bar gets eaten. I've seen patients who could never moderate milk chocolate suddenly find moderation effortless with 85%. The bar simply asks you to slow down. That is not a small thing for someone who has spent decades fighting their own sweet tooth, and it makes consistency far easier. Number 3 takes us to the outer edge of the chocolate world. 100% cacao and cacao nibs. No added sugar, no added milk. No added fat beyond what already lives inside the cacao bean itself. This is cacao stripped down to its truest form, and from a glycemic standpoint, it is as safe as solid chocolate ever gets. Cacao nibs deserve their own mention. These are simply pieces of roasted cacao bean, crushed but not refined. Because they skip the pressing and conching steps that other chocolate goes through, they hold on to more flavonoids and more fiber than any processed bar. They are crunchy, deeply bitter, and they look almost nothing like the chocolate you grew up with. Now let me be honest with you the way I would in my office. Most of my patients cannot sit down and eat 100% chocolate as a treat. The bitterness is too sharp for a palate that has known sweetness for 60 or 70 years, and I have no interest in pretending otherwise. So I do not recommend it as a snack. I recommend it as an ingredient. That is where it becomes powerful and pleasant at the same time. A teaspoon of cacao nibs sprinkled across plain Greek yogurt. 10 grams of 100% chocolate melted and stirred into a spoonful of almond butter. A small handful of nibs folded into your morning oatmeal. These are simple shifts, but they deliver real flavonoid content without changing your blood sugar curve in any meaningful way. Let me tell you about Robert. He came to me at 71, 12 years into type 2 diabetes, sitting at an A1C of 7.3 on metformin. He'd loved chocolate his whole life and had given it up completely for 5 years. His numbers never improved. We talked about cacao nibs, and he started sprinkling a teaspoon over his breakfast oatmeal. 4 months later, he looked at me across the desk and said something I still remember word for word. "I can't believe something this good is actually helping me." His A1C had dropped to 6.8. Number 4 is sugar-free chocolate, but only the kind sweetened with erythritol or stevia. And I'm going to be very direct in this section because this is where the food industry plays its most dishonest game with diabetic shoppers. First, the science of what actually works. Erythritol is a sugar alcohol with a glycemic index of essentially 0. It carries about 70% of the sweetness of regular sugar, but your body absorbs it through a different pathway and excretes most of it through the kidneys without significantly raising blood glucose or stimulating insulin. Stevia, which comes from the leaves of a plant, takes a different route to the same destination. The steviol glycosides are not metabolized by your body at all, and they produce no measurable glucose response. So a chocolate bar sweetened with erythritol or stevia gives you a flavor surprisingly close to the milk chocolate you remember, with almost none of the metabolic cost. But here is where you have to be careful. Many bars marketed as sugar-free in the United States, Canada, and the UK do not use erythritol or stevia at all. They use maltitol. And maltitol has a glycemic index of 52. That is not low. That is genuinely capable of raising your blood sugar, particularly if you eat more than 1 or 2 squares. On top of that, maltitol in older bodies often causes uncomfortable bloating, gas, and even sudden diarrhea because it draws water into the intestine. I have had more than one patient call me in distress after a maltitol-sweetened diabetic chocolate sent them running to the bathroom an hour after dinner. So here's your 30-second rule for this category. Pick up the bar, flip it over. Look at the sweetener line in the ingredient list. You want to see the word erythritol or steviol glycosides clearly named. If you see maltitol, isomalt, or a vague phrase like sugar alcohols, without specifying which one, put the bar back on the shelf. I want to underline this, because this is where the marketing on the front of the package is most disconnected from the reality on the back. A label that says diabetic friendly in large letters can be hiding an ingredient that does the exact opposite of what that promise suggests. Trust the back, never the front. And now we come to number 5, the one I told you to pay close attention to at the start of this video: pure unsweetened cacao powder. It is the cheapest thing on the shelf. You can buy a large container of it for the price of a single fancy chocolate bar. And it is the form of cacao with the strongest clinical evidence behind it by a meaningful margin. I want to walk you carefully through the study that changed how I prescribe cacao to my own patients. A systematic review conducted by researchers at the Universidade Federal Fluminense in Brazil, published in 2021, analyzed 7 clinical studies examining the effects of cacao flavonoids on blood glucose and serum insulin in people living with type 2 diabetes. The consolidated finding was this: dark chocolate or cacao powder at a dose of 25 to 30 grams per day showed beneficial effects on blood glucose and on hemoglobin A1C, along with cardiovascular protection through improved HDL cholesterol. I need you to understand what that A1C finding actually means. A1C is the gold standard. It is the marker your doctor uses to evaluate how well you've controlled your blood sugar over the past 3 months. It is not a snapshot, it is a season. And when a dietary intervention moves that number, you are looking at a real, durable change in how your body is handling glucose. Not a fleeting effect, a structural one. So why does plain cacao powder outperform even the best dark chocolate bar? Because manufacturing a chocolate bar requires pressing, conching, and tempering, and every one of those steps degrades a portion of the flavonoid content. Pure natural cacao powder, the kind that has not been alkalized or Dutch processed, skips most of that loss. Think of a regular chocolate bar like tea brewed from a bag that has already been steeped twice. There is still flavor left, but the active compounds have faded. Pure cacao powder is the whole leaf. In practice, this is the easiest of the 5 to integrate into your daily life. A tablespoon stirred into black coffee, a spoonful blended into plain full-fat yogurt, a teaspoon warmed gently with unsweetened almond milk on the stove, a small amount folded into your morning oatmeal. Every one of those choices delivers more flavonoids than a square of dark chocolate, with essentially no impact on your blood sugar curve. Let me tell you about Carolyn. She came to me at 68, 5 years into type 2 diabetes, with an A1C that had been parked at exactly 7.0 for 2 stubborn years. She was taking her medication faithfully and walking every day. She told me, almost in tears, "I have tried everything. I changed one thing, just one." The sugar and creamer in her morning coffee became 1 tablespoon of pure cacao powder, a few drops of stevia, and unsweetened almond milk. 6 months later, her A1C was 6.5. This is not magic. This is biochemistry, working quietly every morning, in a single cup of coffee. The label trap here is the simplest of all. The ingredient list should contain exactly one item: cocoa powder or cacao powder, nothing else. Avoid hot chocolate mixes, drinking chocolate blends, and any flavored cocoa product, no matter what it claims on the front. Even the ones labeled reduced sugar or diet will quietly contain added sweeteners, modified starches, or oils that destroy the entire metabolic profile you just learned about. Before I close this out, I want to address something that almost never gets discussed in a clinical conversation about food and diabetes, and I think it might be the most important thing I say today. Have you ever forbidden yourself a food completely, only to find yourself eating twice as much of it on a Saturday night, and then spending the next week silently punishing yourself for it? If you nodded just now, please understand, you are not weak. You are human. And your body is responding exactly the way the research predicts. Studies in nutritional psychology have shown something that surprised me when I first read it. People who feel guilty after eating tend to eat more in the hours that follow, not less. The guilt triggers a cycle of restriction, craving, and rebound, and that cycle produces worse blood sugar control over time than a calm, planned, portion-controlled inclusion of the food you actually want. Picture two patients in my clinic eating the exact same 2 squares of 85% dark chocolate after dinner. One of them knows the glycemic index is 22. She understands the flavonoids are quietly improving her insulin sensitivity. She enjoys the chocolate, finishes it, and moves on with her evening. The other believes she is destroying her health with every bite. Her cortisol rises. Her guilt rises. And by 10 o'clock, she has eaten 3 more squares she never planned to touch. Same chocolate. Same body. Completely different outcomes. The knowledge changed the experience, and the experience changed the behavior. This is what sustainable diabetes management actually looks like in real life, over years and decades. Not perfect restriction, not iron willpower, plan the inclusion, control the portion, choose the right type. Those 3 things, repeated quietly, beat a lifetime of guilt every single time. So let me bring all of this back to where we started. Chocolate is not forbidden to you because you have diabetes or pre-diabetes. The wrong chocolate is, and the difference between the two is sitting on the back of every package, waiting 30 seconds for you to read it. You now know the 5 forms that the science actually supports. 70% dark chocolate, your easiest doorway in, with a glycemic index of just 22. 85%, where the clinical evidence shifts to reducing the inflammatory markers that keep your diabetes burning. 100% and cacao nibs, the zero sugar tier, best used as an ingredient woven into yogurt or oatmeal. Sugar-free chocolate sweetened with erythritol or stevia, never maltitol. And finally, pure unsweetened cacao powder, the cheapest option and the one with the strongest A1C evidence of all. Here is what I want you to do, starting tonight. Open your pantry. Pull out every chocolate product you currently own, flip each one over, and read the very first word in the ingredient list. If that word is sugar, set it aside. If the word is cacao mass or cocoa mass, you can keep it. This week, pick up a container of pure, unsweetened cacao powder. Make sure that ingredient list has exactly 1 item. Start with 1 tablespoon in your morning coffee or oatmeal, and check your blood sugar 2 hours after breakfast for the first few days. Your body's response is the only response that truly matters. And at your next visit, ask your doctor a simple, kind question. Given my current A1C, could pure cacao have a place in my nutrition plan? That is a conversation worth having. Now I want to hear from you. Of these 5 types, which one surprised you the most? And which one are you going to try first this week? Tell me in the comments. I read every single one, and your answers shape what I cover next. And if you know someone who has been living under the weight of chocolate guilt for years, send them this video. They deserve to know the truth, and 1 quiet change in their kitchen could move the needle on their next A1C. I'm Dr. Claire Whitmore. 20 years of sitting with patients across the same desk has taught me one thing more than any other. The right knowledge brings relief. The wrong knowledge breeds fear. I want you to walk away from this video feeling lighter, not guiltier. Everything I shared today is for your education, grounded in real clinical evidence, but it does not replace the conversation you have with a doctor who knows your history and your numbers. And please, never adjust or stop your diabetes medication, whether it is metformin, insulin, or anything else, based on something you watched online, including this video. Any change to your prescriptions must go through the physician treating you. I hope this week brings you steadier blood sugar and a gentler relationship with the food on your plate. If today helped, subscribe so I can keep showing up for you each week with information you can actually trust. They believe cheese is dangerous. They believe saturated fat is the enemy, and so they walk away from one of the most powerful blood sugar allies their body could actually use. I want to say this to you clearly. Cheese, when it is the right kind and the right amount, does not raise your blood sugar. In fact, certain cheeses can slow down sugar absorption from the rest of your meal, support the cells in your pancreas that still make insulin, and quietly lower your long-term risk of complications. This is not opinion. This is what the biochemistry shows. Today, I want to walk you through 5 cheeses I personally recommend to my patients with prediabetes and type 2 diabetes. For each one, I will tell you exactly what is happening inside your body when you eat it, how much is safe, and what to eat it with. And pay close attention when I get to number 1, because most people only sprinkle it on pasta, never realizing it carries the highest level of one particular vitamin tied directly to how your pancreas releases insulin. Before we go any further, do me a small favor. Drop your age in the comments and tell me which cheese is sitting in your refrigerator right now, or whether you stopped eating cheese altogether after your diagnosis. I read every single comment, and your answers shape what I cover next. Now, there is something about cheese and blood sugar that almost no one explains correctly, and it can completely change how you interpret your glucose readings. Cheese has a glycemic index of essentially 0. That part is true. But the story does not end there. Roughly 30 to 60% of the protein in cheese can be slowly converted into glucose by your liver through a process called gluconeogenesis about 3 hours after you eat it. The fat in cheese can also produce a small delayed effect on your blood sugar somewhere between 4 and 6 hours later. This effect is much smaller and much slower than what carbohydrates do, but it is real. Think of it this way. A slice of bread is like throwing gasoline on a fire. The flame jumps fast and falls fast. A serving of cheese is more like a small ember in a wood stove. It does not flare. It glows quietly for hours. If you only check your blood sugar 1 hour after eating cheese, you will see a perfectly normal number and assume cheese did nothing at all. But if you measured again at the 3 or 4 hour mark, you might see a gentle rise you did not expect. The cheese is not betraying you. You are simply measuring at the wrong moment. This is why portion matters more than people realize. 1 to 2 thin slices of a firm cheese, or 2 to 4 tablespoons of ricotta or cottage cheese, is the sweet spot. At that amount, the protein and fat actually slow down gastric emptying and stimulate GLP-1, the same incretin hormone that medications like semaglutide work on. In other words, the right portion of cheese protects your blood sugar from the rest of your meal. The wrong portion quietly works against you. A large analysis published in the journal Nutrition and Diabetes, looking at data from more than 16,000 adults, found that regular consumption of cheese and yogurt was associated with a lower risk of developing type 2 diabetes. So with that lens in place, let me start the countdown. I am going from number 5 down to number 1. Because the most surprising cheese on this list is the one I want to leave you with at the end. Number 5 on my list is fresh mozzarella. And I am starting here because it is one of the most accessible cheeses in any American grocery store, which means you can put this advice into practice tomorrow morning without hunting down anything specialty. In 100 grams of fresh mozzarella, you get about 18 grams of high-quality protein, virtually 0 carbohydrate, and a moderate fat content that is noticeably lower than aged hard cheeses. But the real reason fresh mozzarella earns its place on this list is not just its protein, it is what it does for your gut. Fresh mozzarella is a naturally fermented cheese. It contains live bacterial cultures that act as mild probiotics inside your digestive tract. And here is where it matters for blood sugar. Over the past decade, the connection between your gut microbiome and your insulin sensitivity has become one of the most active areas of research in metabolic medicine. A balanced, diverse microbiome produces compounds called short-chain fatty acids, including one named butyrate, which has been shown to directly support the function of the beta cells in your pancreas, the same cells that produce insulin. A healthy microbiome also dampens the low-grade chronic inflammation that quietly feeds insulin resistance, especially in adults over 60. Let me tell you about Kathleen, 67 years old, who came to me with an HbA1c of 7.2. She had cut every dairy product out of her kitchen for almost 3 years because someone told her saturated fat would make her diabetes worse. She was exhausted, hungry between meals, and her numbers were not improving. I asked her to do one small thing. Add 50 to 80 grams of fresh mozzarella to her lunch 4 times a week, paired with tomato, basil, and a drizzle of olive oil. The classic caprese. 3 months later, her HbA1c came down to 6.5, and she told me the afternoon sugar cravings had quietly disappeared. One word of caution, sodium content in fresh mozzarella varies a lot between brands. If you also have high blood pressure, read the label and look for a low-sodium version. And if you can find fresh mozzarella di bufala made from buffalo milk, the fatty acid profile is even more favorable. What you want to avoid is the rubbery, shrink-wrapped string cheese marketed to children. That is a different product entirely, with very little of the protective benefit I just described. So that is number 5, but let me move you to number 4, because this next one is even easier to find, and gram for gram, it is one of the leanest protein options I can put on your plate. Number 4 is cottage cheese. And I want you to pay attention to something most people miss about this one. Cottage cheese does not protect your blood sugar mainly through what it does inside your bloodstream. It protects your blood sugar through what it stops you from doing 2 hours later. Let me explain. In 100 grams of cottage cheese, you get roughly 98 calories, 11 to 12 grams of protein, and fewer than 4 grams of carbohydrate. Gram for gram, it is one of the highest protein-to-calorie dairy options you can buy in any American supermarket. And when you eat that much protein in such a small amount of calories, your body releases satiety hormones, including PYY and cholecystokinin, which keep your appetite quiet for the next 3 to 4 hours. For a person over 60 managing blood sugar, that is enormous. Because the truth is, most blood sugar damage does not come from the meal in front of you. It comes from the cookies, the crackers, the handful of pretzels at 3 in the afternoon when hunger sneaks up and you grab the first thing in the pantry. Cottage cheese at breakfast or as a mid-morning snack quietly shuts that door. There is a second benefit working in the background. Cottage cheese is naturally rich in calcium, and meta-analyses published in journals like the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition have consistently shown that adequate dietary calcium intake is associated with improved insulin sensitivity over time. This is not a dramatic overnight effect. It is a slow, steady contribution that builds month after month. One trap I see all the time at the dairy aisle. Plain cottage cheese is a friend. Cottage cheese mixed with pineapple chunks or peaches floating in syrup is not. That sweetened version can have 18 to 20 grams of added sugar per cup, which completely cancels every benefit I just described. Read the label. If you see syrup, sugar, or fruit juice concentrate, put it back. Use cottage cheese plain at breakfast with strawberries or kiwi, as a spread on whole grain toast instead of cream cheese, or as a base for a dip with herbs and lemon. And while we are here, let me ask you something. When was the last time you actually checked your blood sugar 3 hours after a cheese-heavy meal, not just 1 hour? Tell me in the comments. Most of my patients have never been told to measure at that window, and it changes everything. Number 3 takes us across the Mediterranean, and this one carries a fat the rest of this list does not have. Number 3 on my list is feta. And the reason feta deserves a spot here has nothing to do with what most people think of when they hear the word. It has to do with the kind of milk it comes from, and the very specific type of fat inside that milk. Authentic Greek feta, the kind protected under European Union law, must be made from sheep's milk, or a blend of sheep and goat milk. That detail matters more than you might guess. Sheep's milk contains noticeably higher concentrations of a particular fatty acid called conjugated linoleic acid, or CLA, than cow's milk does. And CLA has shown up in study after study as a fat associated with improved insulin sensitivity and, more importantly for my patients over 60, with a reduction in visceral fat. Visceral fat is the fat that wraps itself silently around your liver, your pancreas, and your intestines. It is not the fat you can pinch at your waistline. It is hidden, and it is the most metabolically dangerous fat in the human body. I often describe it to my patients as a thick layer of grease that is built up around the engine of a car. From the outside, the car looks fine, but under the hood, every part is working harder, running hotter, and wearing out faster. That is exactly what visceral fat does to your pancreas and liver, and it is one of the strongest drivers of insulin resistance in older adults. In 100 grams of authentic feta, you get about 14 grams of protein and less than 4 grams of carbohydrate. It is also a fermented cheese, which means it contributes the same kind of beneficial bacteria to your gut that I described with mozzarella. Now, 2 warnings. First, there is a difference between authentic Greek feta and the American-style feta sold in plastic tubs in many supermarkets. American-style feta is often made from cow's milk and does not carry the same CLA profile. Look for the words "made from sheep's milk" on the label. Second, feta is salty by design, since it is preserved in brine. If you have high blood pressure, rinse it briefly under cold water before using. That simple step can cut the sodium content by roughly 1/3. Crumble it over a Greek salad with cucumber, olives, and olive oil. Use it as a filling in a spinach omelet. Sprinkle it over roasted vegetables. Now we are at number 2, and this is the cheese I tell my patients to keep in their refrigerator at all times. Number 2 on my list is ricotta. And ricotta earns this position because of a quiet biochemical fact that almost no one with diabetes has ever been told. Most cheeses you buy are made from the solid curds of milk. Ricotta is different. Ricotta is made from the whey, the liquid that is left over when other cheeses are produced. That single difference changes everything about what ricotta does inside your body. The protein in ricotta is whey protein, the same protein sold in expensive tubs at fitness stores. The protein in most other cheeses is casein. They look the same on a nutrition label, but they behave very differently after you swallow them. Whey protein is absorbed faster. It is rich in an amino acid called leucine, which is one of the most powerful natural stimulators of GLP-1 release in the human gut. That is the very same hormone pathway that medications like semaglutide and tirzepatide target. In a study published in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition, patients with type 2 diabetes who consumed whey protein shortly before a meal saw their after-meal blood sugar spike drop by close to 28% compared to a control group. 28% from a spoonful of cheese eaten at the right time. In 100 grams of ricotta, you get about 174 calories, 11 grams of protein, only 3 grams of carbohydrate, and significantly less saturated fat than aged hard cheeses. For a patient who is managing both blood sugar and cholesterol, that combination is hard to beat. Let me tell you about Raymond, 71 years old, who had been living with type 2 diabetes for 12 years. He kept hitting what he called his afternoon crash around 4 in the afternoon. Shaky hands, foggy head, and a desperate hunger that always sent him to the cookie jar. I asked him to swap that snack for half a cup of ricotta stirred with fresh herbs, a slice of whole grain toast, and a small handful of almonds. 6 weeks later, the crashes were gone, and his pre-dinner glucose readings were noticeably steadier. One tip from the kitchen. Plain ricotta has a mild, almost neutral flavor that puts a lot of people off the first time they try it. Stir in fresh basil, parsley, or chives, a pinch of salt, and a drizzle of olive oil. Suddenly, it tastes like something you actually want to eat. And now, the cheese I promised you at the very beginning. The one most people use only as a condiment, never realizing what it carries. Number 1 on my list is Parmesan. And I know that of every cheese I have mentioned so far, this is the one most people would never expect to see at the top of a diabetes-friendly list. But the science behind Parmesan is more robust than almost anyone realizes. And once you understand it, you will look at that little wedge in your refrigerator very differently. I am not talking about the powdered Parmesan in the green shaker can. I am talking about authentic, aged Parmigiano Reggiano, imported from Italy, or a high-quality domestic aged Parmesan that has been ripened for at least 18 to 24 months. In 30 grams of that cheese, a small amount that would only ever be used as a topping, you get 8 grams of protein. 8 grams. That is more protein per gram than any other cheese on this list. The carbohydrate content is essentially zero, and because the long aging process breaks down nearly all of the lactose, even patients with mild lactose sensitivity tolerate it beautifully. But the real reason Parmesan claims the top spot is vitamin K2. Aged Parmesan carries one of the highest concentrations of vitamin K2 found in any animal source food on Earth. And vitamin K2, specifically the forms called MK4 and MK7, has growing evidence connecting it directly to how your pancreas releases insulin. A study published in the journal Diabetes Care, following more than 38,000 adults for an average of 10 years, found that higher intake of vitamin K2 was associated with approximately a 20% lower risk of developing type 2 diabetes. There is a second reason this matters for you. Vitamin K2 acts almost like a traffic director inside your body. It tells calcium where to go. With enough K2, calcium is guided into your bones and teeth, where you actually need it. Without enough K2, calcium can quietly settle into the walls of your arteries and into soft tissue, where it does real damage. For a person over 60 managing type 2 diabetes, that distinction is critical, because diabetic patients carry a risk of arterial calcification 2 to 4 times higher than the general population. Let me tell you about Laura, 69 years old, with prediabetes at an HbA1c of 6.2, and a recent diagnosis of osteopenia alongside early coronary calcification on her scan. A very common combination for women after menopause with prediabetes. I asked her to add 1 to 2 tablespoons of grated Parmigiano Reggiano daily, sprinkled over roasted vegetables and soups, alongside her usual walking routine. 8 months later, her HbA1c was 5.7, and her bone density had stabilized. Use it as a finishing condiment, 1 or 2 tablespoons over salad, scrambled eggs, vegetable soup, or whole grain pasta. Massive flavor, zero glycemic impact. Now you have the 5. But there is one more thing I need you to know before you walk into a grocery store, because here is the uncomfortable truth. A cheese can be biochemically wonderful on paper, and you can still walk out of the supermarket holding a version of it that quietly works against your blood sugar. So before we close, let me show you the 3 traps I see my patients fall into again and again. The first trap is the individually wrapped American cheese slice, the kind that does not even need refrigeration on the shelf. I want to be honest with you. That product is not really cheese in any meaningful sense. It is a processed dairy compound containing modified starches, vegetable oils, emulsifiers, preservatives, and often a small amount of added sugar. It does not deliver the GLP-1 stimulation, the probiotic benefit, or the K2 content of real cheese. If you have been using these slices in your sandwiches, you are not getting any of the protection I just spent the last 20 minutes describing. The second trap is pre-shredded cheese in a bag. To keep it from clumping, manufacturers coat the shreds with cellulose powder and sometimes potato starch. That adds 1 to 2 grams of hidden carbohydrate per serving, which most diabetics never count. The third trap is cream cheese. Not dangerous in small amounts, but the fat-to-protein ratio is poor. You get plenty of calories and very little of the protein leverage that makes the 5 cheeses on this list useful. The rule is simple. Read the ingredient list. If it is longer than milk, salt, rennet, and bacterial cultures, put it back on the shelf. And 2 more things I owe you before we move on. If you are living with high blood pressure, heart failure, or chronic kidney disease, please be honest about your total sodium for the day when you increase cheese in your meals. Rinsing feta helps, but it does not solve everything. Watch your ankles in the evening. Watch your morning weight. Those are your early warning signs. And one more truth. Not every body responds to saturated fat the same way. A small group of patients will see LDL cholesterol climb noticeably even when blood sugar improves. So if you increase cheese, please check a lipid panel about 3 months in and let the numbers tell you what your body actually prefers. Now let me bring all of this together so you know exactly what to do tomorrow morning. Here's what I want you to walk away with tonight. Cheese is not the enemy of a person living with type 2 diabetes. The wrong kind, the wrong portion, and the wrong timing are. When you choose mozzarella, you are feeding the bacteria in your gut that quietly support insulin sensitivity. When you choose cottage cheese, you are buying yourself 3 to 4 hours of freedom from the snack drawer. When you choose feta, you are bringing in a fat that helps shrink the dangerous fat hidden around your organs. When you choose ricotta, you are stimulating the same hormone pathway as the most advanced diabetes medications on the market. And when you choose aged Parmesan, you are quietly protecting both your pancreas and your arteries with vitamin K2. So here is what I want you to do this week. Walk into your grocery store and buy 2 cheeses, 1 tub of plain ricotta and 1 wedge of aged Parmigiano Reggiano. Those 2 alone will cover most of your meals. Next, change the order of your bites. Eat your cheese and vegetables first and save your bread, rice, or pasta for last. That single shift in sequence will lower your after-meal glucose spike more than almost anything else you can do at the table. Keep your portion to 1 or 2 thin slices, or 2 to 4 tablespoons of the softer cheeses, or 1 to 2 tablespoons of grated Parmesan. And the next time you check your blood sugar after a cheese-containing meal, do it twice. Once at the 1-hour mark, and again at the 3-hour mark. You will see things you have never seen before. If you want one question to ask your doctor at your next visit, ask whether your vitamin K2 status and bone density should be checked alongside your HbA1c, especially if you are a woman past menopause. Now I have a question for you. Of these 5 cheeses, which one surprised you the most, and which one is already sitting in your refrigerator tonight? Tell me in the comments. I read every single one, and your answers genuinely help me understand what you are working with. And if you know someone over 60 who threw out their cheese the day they got their diagnosis, send them this video. They deserve to know exactly which ones to bring back, how much to use, and why. I am Dr. Claire Whitmore. After more than 20 years walking alongside patients managing their blood sugar, I have learned that the people who thrive into their 70s and 80s are not the ones with the strictest restrictions. They are the ones who learn to choose well. Everything I share with you here is meant to support the care of your own doctor, never to replace it. Please do not adjust or stop any medication, whether metformin, insulin, or a GLP-1 agonist, based on a video. Bring these ideas to your next appointment and let your doctor walk through them with you. Take care of yourself, eat with confidence, and if this channel has earned a small place in your week, tap subscribe before you go. I will see you in the next one. You've heard it from every direction. If you have diabetes, drink your coffee black and leave the creamer alone. It sounds responsible. It sounds like settled science. And after more than 20 years helping people over 60 get their blood sugar under control, I'm telling you it's one of the most misunderstood pieces of advice out there. Here's what gets left out. Black coffee isn't neutral either. A meta-analysis that pooled 18 separate trials found that caffeine itself raises your glucose and lowers how well your body responds to insulin. In people with type 2 diabetes, caffeine equal to about 2 cups with a meal pushed blood sugar roughly 8% higher than a day with none. So that pure black cup you've been suffering through, it was quietly working against you. The real truth is narrower and kinder. It was never the creamer that threatened your blood sugar. It's the kind of creamer Choose right, and a splash in your coffee can be perfectly safe after 60, and sometimes steadier than black. So today, I'll give you 5 creamers I'd actually welcome in your cup, what's in each one, and why it works. Pay close attention to number 5, the one you'd swear your doctor told you to avoid, because I'll show you why, in moderation, it may be the safest splash of all. But before we get into them, do something for me. Tell me what's in your cup right this moment. Whatever you pour in your coffee, type it down in the comments. And if you'd like more honest, trustworthy guidance on keeping your blood sugar steady after 60, subscribe so the next one finds you. Let me start with the thing almost nobody says out loud. When I talk about creamer, I don't just mean the bottle with the picture of hazelnuts on the front. I mean anything you stir into your coffee to soften it. The flavored stuff, yes, but also half and half. A spoonful of heavy cream, a pour of soy milk. All of it counts. So when I tell you the right creamer can be safe, I'm not playing word games and pointing you towards some watered-down imitation. I mean the real things people actually reach for in the morning. Now, let's come back to that 8% I mentioned a moment ago. Why isn't black coffee as harmless as we've all been led to believe? Because of a meta-analysis published in 2019, drawing on 18 separate trials, in which researchers found that caffeine itself raises your glucose and lowers how well your body responds to insulin. That's exactly why so many of my patients drink their coffee with nothing in it, and still watch their morning number sit stubbornly high. The good news is this. When you add a little of the right fat or protein, you can soften that response. Think of it this way. Your morning coffee wakes up more than your mind. It nudges your liver to release stored sugar into your blood, like revving the engine hard while the gas tank is still nearly empty. So drinking it black was never some moral reward. And here's the part that surprises people most. That little splash of the right creamer isn't just harmless. It can leave your blood sugar steadier than the black coffee you've been forcing down. So what makes a creamer safe? I hold everyone to the same short list. Almost no added sugar, under 3 grams. Low in carbohydrate, under 4 grams. No inflammatory additives like carrageenan, no hydrogenated oils. And steer clear of most things labeled sugar-free, because so many of them lean on sucralose. I'll explain exactly why that matters when we get to number 3. I'll walk you through all 5, lightest to richest. But it's number 5, the richest one of all, that turns out to be the gentlest on your blood sugar. I think of Nancy here. She came to me at 66, and early on she admitted something quietly. She told me I dreaded my own coffee every morning. For years, she'd been drinking it black, hating every sip, because somewhere along the way, she'd decided that was simply the rule for someone like her. Nobody had ever told her there was another way. So let's start where she should have started. The simplest, cleanest option on the list. Number 1 is Nut Pods Unsweetened. If you want the easiest possible place to begin, this is it. It's built on a base of almond and coconut, and it asks almost nothing of your blood sugar. Look at what's actually in a tablespoon. 10 calories, 1 gram of fat, 0 grams of saturated fat, 0 carbohydrate, 0 sugar. That's about as close to nothing as a creamer can get while still turning your coffee a soft, pale color and rounding off that sharp edge. And the ingredient list is just as quiet. Water, coconut cream, almonds, acacia gum, dipotassium phosphate, sunflower lecithin, sea salt, and gellan gum. That's it. No sweeteners slipped in, no carrageenan, which is one of those additives I'd rather you not have stirred into something you drink every single day. When I look at that label, there's nothing that makes me pause, and that's exactly what I want from an everyday creamer. So why does it pass my test so easily? Because with no sugar and no carbohydrate to speak of, it barely registers on your blood sugar at all. You get the comfort of a creamy cup without the rise. And it's clean of the additives that quietly stir up inflammation in the background, which matters more as the years add up. Who is this one really for? If you want something light and neutral, something that softens your coffee without taking it over, this is your creamer. It's also a genuine relief for anyone whose stomach has turned against dairy over the years, the way so many of us find it does after 60. And if you've moved toward eating plant-based, it fits there too. No compromise needed. One practical word, because it matters. Make sure you pick up the one that actually says unsweetened on the carton. Nut Pods makes flavored versions too, and some of those taste like a different product entirely. The unsweetened is the one you want for what we're talking about here. And once you open it, keep it in the refrigerator and use it within about 7 to 10 days, because a clean product like this has nothing extra in it to make it last. Now, if you'd like to keep your blood sugar even flatter than this, there's a way to do that, and it comes down to one ingredient most people overlook. That's where the next one earns its place. Number 2 is unsweetened soy milk, and that overlooked ingredient I just mentioned is protein. Of all the plant-based options you can pour into your coffee, soy gives you the most of it, and that turns out to matter for your blood sugar. Here are the numbers. About 2 tablespoons gives you 16 calories, 1 gram of fat, 2 grams of carbohydrate, and a gram of protein. Pour in enough to lighten a full cup, and you're looking at roughly 4 grams of carbohydrate, which is actually lower than what you'd get from regular cow's milk. But the protein is the real reason it's on this list. Remember what I told you a moment ago, that adding a little protein or fat can soften the rise coffee causes. Soy is where you see that most clearly among the lighter options. That small bit of protein gives your body something to slow down for, so the cup works a little more gently inside you. I know some of you tensed up the moment I said soy because you've heard worrying things about it, especially for older adults. Let me put that to rest in one breath. Most of those fears have been badly overblown, and unsweetened soy milk is, if anything, a heart-friendly choice. There's no reason to be afraid of it in your coffee. A couple of practical notes. Reach for the one marked unsweetened, because the vanilla and the regular sweetened versions can carry a startling amount of sugar. Look for a short ingredient list while you're at it. And if you like your coffee with more body, the unsweetened barista versions are thicker and froth up nicely without adding sugar. So, who is this one for? If almonds don't agree with you, soy steps right in and fills that gap, since it isn't a tree nut at all. And if you want something light that also slips a little protein into your morning, this is a smart, easy choice. By now, though, I can hear the question forming for a good number of you. What about the people who simply can't stand coffee that tastes thin and plain? The ones who need a little sweetness to even want to pick up the cup? I haven't forgotten you. And the next one is where we finally talk about how to have that sweetness safely. Number 3 is for everyone who wants their coffee a little sweet, and here's the good news I've been waiting to give you. You can have that sweetness without sending your blood sugar climbing. The whole thing comes down to how the creamer is sweetened. Take Primal as an example. It's built on a base of coconut oil, MCT oil, and organic coconut milk, and it gets its sweetness from erythritol, monk fruit, and stevia. No added sugar, no artificial flavors. A sweet, flavored cup with none of the sugar that name usually carries. So why do I point you toward monk fruit and stevia in particular? Because they cause almost no insulin response at all. Your body tastes the sweetness, but your blood sugar stays where it was. That's the whole reason these sweeteners earn a place in anything I'd recommend. Now, why steer away from sucralose? This isn't me being fussy. A study published in the journal Cell in 2022 tested several sweeteners head-to-head, and of all of them, only sucralose and saccharin clearly worsened people's blood sugar response. The researchers were even able to reproduce that effect by transferring the gut bacteria into germ-free mice, which tells you the change was real. One 30-day trial found sucralose dropped insulin sensitivity by just over 20%. Stevia, on the other hand, the riboside A in it, actually nudged helpful families of gut bacteria in the right direction. Same sweet taste, opposite story underneath. One honest caution for those of us over 60. Erythritol, in larger amounts, can leave some people a little bloated or gassy, so start with a small pour and let your stomach get used to it. There's no prize for rushing. This one's really for the sweet coffee lovers, the folks who've been reaching for a flavored sugary creamer every morning and didn't know there was a clean way to keep that pleasure. Betty comes to mind. At 70, she'd been starting every day with a creamer proudly labeled sugar-free, certain she was doing the right thing. When she switched to a monk fruit version, she told me her stomach simply felt easier, lighter, in a way she hadn't expected. So let me ask you something, and be honest with me. Have you been forcing down black coffee for years because you thought you had to? Tell me how long it's been. I'd like to know. Now. What if you'd rather have the real thing? Actual dairy. The way you grew up with it? Number 4 is real half and half, the plain unsweetened kind. And I want to say this plainly because so many of you have been waiting to hear it. Real dairy is still allowed. You don't have to give it up to keep your blood sugar in line. Look at the numbers and you'll see why. A tablespoon of half and half runs about 20 calories, 1 7/10 grams of fat, 6/10 of a gram of carbohydrate, and 6/10 of a gram of sugar, and that small amount of sugar is just the natural lactose, no sugar added. For something that tastes this much like the coffee you remember, that's a remarkably gentle profile, and that little bit of real fat does something useful. Picture sugar entering your bloodstream like water through a wide-open tap, fast and all at once. A touch of fat narrows that tap. It turns the rush into a slower, steadier stream, so the sugar arrives more gradually instead of hitting all at once. That's the quiet advantage of real dairy that the low-fat advice of years past completely missed. Which brings me to the fear so many of you still carry, that the fat in dairy is bad for your heart. I understand where that came from, but the evidence has genuinely shifted underneath it. A state-of-the-art review in the Journal of the American College of Cardiology placed whole-fat dairy among the foods high in saturated fat that are not, in fact, linked to greater cardiovascular risk. And a pooled analysis of biomarkers published in PLOS Medicine in 2018 found that the markers of dairy fat in people's blood were tied to a lower risk of developing type 2 diabetes, not a higher one. Read that again, because it's the opposite of what most of us were taught. Now, I'm not handing you a license here. This is still something to use with a sensible hand, a splash, not a flood. Moderation hasn't gone out of style, but the days of treating a little real cream in your coffee as a dangerous indulgence are behind us. So who is half and half for? If you're loyal to real dairy, if you want your coffee to taste the way it always has, and you reach for it every single morning, this is a perfectly reasonable everyday choice. And if half and half surprised you, hold on. Because the last one on this list sounds like the exact opposite of everything you've been told. The richest, most indulgent option of them all. The one I suspect you've been carefully avoiding for years. Number 5 is heavy cream. And I know exactly what's going through your mind right now, because I've watched it cross 100 faces in my office. Of everything in the dairy case, this is the one you've been treating like it's off limits. The richest, the most decadent, the one that surely must be the worst possible thing for your blood sugar. It's almost the gentlest of them all. Let me show you the numbers because they tell the whole story. A tablespoon of heavy cream has just 42 hundredths of a gram of carbohydrate, 2 hundredths of a gram of sugar, practically nothing. Yes, it carries 5.5 grams of fat, of which 3 4/10 are saturated, and 51 calories. But because there's almost no sugar in it at all, it doesn't lift your blood sugar the way sweetened creamers or syrupy flavored bottles do. It just doesn't have the thing that causes the rise. Sit with that for a moment, because this is the heart of it. The very creamer you've been most afraid of, the one that felt like cheating, turns out to touch your blood sugar the least. Not because of some trick, but for the simplest reason in the world. There's barely any sugar or lactose left in it to begin with. Now I have to be careful with you here, and I will be, because this is where I'd never want you to hear only half of what I'm saying. Gentle on your blood sugar does not mean pour as much as you please. These two things are separate. A spoonful is wonderful. Half a cup every day is a different conversation. And while the evidence on dairy fat and the heart has loosened considerably, the way I just walked you through, that doesn't erase good judgment. If you live with heart disease or your LDL cholesterol runs high, the amount of saturated fat you take in still deserves a real talk with the doctor who knows your case. I'm not here to tell you those concerns don't exist. I'm here to tell you the picture is more balanced than you were led to believe. I think of Kenneth for this one. He came in at 71, and his chart showed years of carefully steering clear of heavy cream, certain it was the worst choice a man with diabetes could make. He was wearing a continuous glucose monitor at the time, so we decided to simply test it. He stirred a little heavy cream into his morning coffee and watched. His blood sugar barely moved, just the faintest rise. He had a habit of writing his number down in a little notebook every morning, and he told me, with a kind of amazement, that he'd spent years afraid of a number that turned out to be almost flat. What I told Kenneth is the same thing I'll tell you, because the number on a glucose monitor only tells part of the story. The way you use heavy cream matters as much as the cream itself. A tablespoon, the amount that disappears into a single cup, is a world apart from the heavy pour that turns coffee into something closer to dessert. I've watched people hear low in sugar and take it as permission to use 3 or 4 tablespoons at a sitting, several times a day. And at that point, the calories and the saturated fat do start to add up in a way worth paying attention to. So treat it the way you'd treat any rich good thing. A measured splash in your morning cup, enjoyed without guilt. Not a habit that quietly grows larger month after month until you've lost track of how much you're really having. The freedom I'm handing you here comes with that one small responsibility. Pour it on purpose, not on autopilot. So here's where we land, after all 5. From the lightest splash of nut pods to the richest spoon of heavy cream, the lesson holds from the first to the last. The creamer was never the enemy. It was always the kind. Get that right. And every one of these can keep your morning coffee working for you instead of against you. And that changes how you walk up to your own kitchen counter tomorrow morning. So let me leave you with exactly what to do with all of this. So let it sink in, the thing we started with. Coffee creamer was never the enemy. The kind of creamer was the only thing that ever mattered. Choose well, and that morning cup can quietly work for your blood sugar instead of against it. You don't have to sit there forcing down bitter black coffee, paying a price that was never really owed. 5 safe choices are sitting in your hands now, from the lightest splash to the richest spoon. The fear was the part you can finally set down. Let me give you something to actually do with this. First, turn the bottle around and read the first 2 or 3 ingredients. If you see added sugar, corn syrup, hydrogenated oil, or sucralose near the top, put it back. Reach for the short, plain labels you can read out loud. Second, if you want sweetness, choose monk fruit, stevia, or erythritol, never sucralose, and start with a small pour so your stomach adjusts. Third, measure what you pour, 1 to 2 tablespoons, because most people use 2 or 3 times the serving on the label without realizing it. And fourth, become your own evidence. Check your blood sugar an hour or 2 after you try a new creamer and let your own body tell you how it responds. Now I'd love to hear from you. Of these 5, which one is going into your cup first this week? And just as telling, which creamer are you finally ready to let go of? And if there's someone you care about who's managing their blood sugar but still loves their morning coffee, send this their way. It may be the thing that lifts a little fear off their shoulders too. I'm Dr. Claire Whitmore, and more than anything, I want to see you healthy and enjoying that morning cup without a knot of worry in your chest. Everything I've shared today is here to teach, not to replace the doctor who knows you. And please never stop or change a diabetes medication, your insulin, your metformin, any of it, without talking to your own doctor first. Take good care of yourself, and I'll see you again soon. Don't forget to subscribe. The jar of peanut butter sitting in your kitchen right now is doing one of 2 things to your body every night. It is either helping your heart, your blood sugar, and your brain quietly do their most important work between midnight and sunrise, or it is silently sabotaging all of it. I have watched this exact pattern unfold in my clinic for over 20 years. Two patients, same age, same goal, both eating peanut butter before bed. One walks in 6 weeks later with steadier morning blood sugar, sleeping through the night for the first time in years. The other walks in with a higher A1C and no idea why. The difference between them is not willpower. It is not how disciplined they are. It is what is written on the back of the jar. Between 2 and 6 in the morning, your body after 60 is doing 3 things that decide how you feel for the next day. It is trying to balance your blood sugar. It is repairing the small tears in your muscles. It is washing waste products out of your brain. A study from Penn State, published in the Journal of Nutrition, looked at what happens when adults with elevated fasting glucose ate peanuts at night for 6 weeks. The results were surprising in both directions. In the next few minutes, I will walk you through exactly what peanut butter does inside your body while you sleep, and a labeling mistake nearly 70% of people over 60 are quietly making. Take a moment and tell me, what is the last thing you usually eat or drink in the hour before bed? Type it in the comments, whatever it is, no judgment. I read these, and what you share helps me know what to talk about next. And if you want to be part of a quiet community of people over 60 who are taking their health back one small habit at a time, subscribe and join us. So what is actually happening inside your body between midnight and sunrise? Most people picture sleep as the body shutting down for the night. The lights go off, the engine stops, and we drift away until morning. The truth is exactly the opposite. The hours between when your head hits the pillow and when your alarm goes off are some of the busiest hours your body has all day. Your muscles are rebuilding the tiny tears that accumulated during everything you did today, every step, every grocery bag, every flight of stairs. Your blood vessels are restoring their flexibility. Your brain is running a kind of nightly housekeeping, flushing out the metabolic waste that built up while you were thinking, worrying, and remembering. 3 jobs in particular take priority: stabilizing your blood sugar, rebuilding muscle protein, and cleaning your brain through what we call the glymphatic system. After 60, those 3 jobs become more delicate. Your growth hormone release drops compared to your 40s. Your insulin response in the middle of the night is slower than it used to be. And your muscles do not respond to protein the way they once did, a phenomenon researchers call anabolic resistance. None of this is your fault. It is just the way the body changes after a certain age. But it does mean that what you put into your stomach in the 30 to 60 minutes before you lie down has far more weight than it did when you were 45. The food in that small window becomes the raw material your body uses for the night shift. Choose the right one and you support every system. Choose the wrong one and you quietly sabotage it, and the very first thing your body fights with each night is the one almost no one connects to what they ate. 3 in the morning, your eyes open, the room is dark, the house is quiet, and there is no obvious reason you should be awake. Your skin feels slightly warm, your mind starts spinning. You try to go back to sleep but cannot, and finally drift off just before the alarm. Sound familiar? Most people blame age. They blame the bed, or stress, or the news. Almost no one looks at what is actually happening underneath the sheets. Between 2 and 8 in the morning, your liver releases stored glucose into your bloodstream while you sleep. Your cortisol rises, your blood sugar climbs. We call this the dawn phenomenon, and it happens to nearly everyone after 60, diagnosed or not. Think of your liver as running a quiet graveyard shift, pouring glucose into your bloodstream hour by hour. In a younger body, the pancreas answers quickly with insulin and the levels stay smooth. After 60, that response slows. The swings widen. When the level dips too low between releases, the body releases a small burst of adrenaline to pull the sugar back up. That burst does not feel dramatic. It feels exactly like waking at 3 with a racing chest. This is where peanut butter, the right kind, becomes useful. Real peanut butter has a glycemic index of about 14, which is remarkably low. 2 tablespoons gives about 7 grams of protein and 16 grams of healthy fat. That combination slows digestion and stretches the energy release across the first 4 to 6 hours of sleep. exactly when the dawn pattern would otherwise spike and crash hardest. A team at Penn State, led by Dr. Sapp and Dr. Chris Etherton, published their results in the Journal of Nutrition in 2022. They asked 50 adults with fasting glucose around 100 to eat 28 grams of peanuts as an evening snack for 6 weeks. The nighttime dose did not raise fasting glucose at all, and it shifted their fat intake toward the healthier kind. Another study by Johnston and colleagues in the Journal of the American College of Nutrition found that 32 grams of peanut butter added to a meal cut the post-meal glucose spike by roughly 30%. A patient of mine, Linda, 67, came in frustrated. She had been on metformin for 2 years, and her morning glucose still hovered between 118 and 125. "Doctor," she said, "I do not eat anything after dinner. Why is my morning still high?" I asked her about her last hour before bed and made one small change. 4 weeks later, she told me she had slept through the night for the first time in years, and her mornings were finally easing. Steadying blood sugar is only the first thing. Something else is happening inside your brain the very moment your eyes close, and what peanut butter does there surprises most people. Your brain does not store melatonin in a tank, waiting for sundown. It manufactures it fresh, every single night, from raw materials you bring in through your food. And the most important raw material in that process is an amino acid called tryptophan. The pathway moves like this. Tryptophan enters your bloodstream after digestion. It crosses into the brain, where enzymes convert it first into a compound called 5-HTP, then into serotonin, the chemical your body associates with calm and contentment. Once darkness falls, your pineal gland turns part of that serotonin into melatonin, the hormone that signals every cell in your body that it is time to rest. Peanut butter contains tryptophan. It is not the highest source. Turkey and salmon have more. But it comes with a meaningful dose of healthy fat. And when paired with even a small amount of complex carbohydrate, that combination does something the body needs. Here is the trick. To get into the brain, tryptophan must cross what we call the blood-brain barrier, and it competes with several other amino acids for the same transporter. When you eat plain protein, those competitors crowd the gate. But when tryptophan is eaten alongside a carbohydrate, half an apple or a slice of whole grain toast, your body releases a gentle pulse of insulin. That insulin clears the competing amino acids out of your bloodstream. The gate opens. Tryptophan walks through. A review published in the International Journal of Tryptophan Research by Richard and colleagues in 2009 gathered the evidence and concluded that tryptophan from food can improve sleep quality and shorten the time it takes to fall asleep, especially when paired this way. I want to be honest with you. The effect is gentle, not magical. One trial in firefighters working night shifts found no measurable sleep change at all. So I do not promise miracles. Peanut butter is a quiet supporter of sleep, not a sleep medicine. Tryptophan and melatonin are only one side of the story. Hidden inside those same 2 tablespoons is a mineral that nearly 3 out of 4 American adults are quietly short on, and it shapes sleep more directly than most people realize. Magnesium is one of those minerals that does so much quiet work inside the body that we forget to talk about it. 2 tablespoons of natural peanut butter give you roughly 49 milligrams, which is about 12% of what an adult needs in a day. That sounds modest, but it adds up. Inside your body, magnesium activates the parasympathetic nervous system, the part of you that whispers, "Slow down, it is safe to rest." It supports GABA, a brain messenger that quiets electrical activity and helps you drift off. It eases the muscle tightness behind those leg cramps that wake so many people after 60, and it helps your heart hold a steady rhythm at night when blood pressure should naturally dip into its lowest setting. The part that surprises my patients most is this. Magnesium deficiency is not rare in adults over 60. It is common. 3 forces work against you. Your body absorbs less magnesium from food as you age. Several common medications quietly deplete it. Proton pump inhibitors for reflux, loop diuretics for blood pressure, and some laxatives. And appetite often shrinks after 60, so the total food you eat in a day is smaller, and the micronutrients with it. A long review in the journal Magnesium Research found that low magnesium is strongly tied to insomnia, poor sleep efficiency, and nighttime muscle cramps in adults over 50. National survey data suggests close to 75% of American adults fall short of the recommended magnesium from diet alone. Peanut butter will not cure a deficiency on its own. But as a nightly contribution alongside your other meals, it adds up over weeks. Quick question for you, and I read these answers personally. Have you ever had your magnesium level checked on a routine blood test? Type yes or no in the comments. Most patients I see have never seen that number on their lab report, and it is one of the most useful numbers to ask your doctor about at your next visit. Even with magnesium and blood sugar working in your favor, there is one more process slipping quietly after 60 that almost no one connects to a bedtime snack, and this is where peanut butter does something most people never expect. After 50, the human body loses between 3 and 8% of its muscle mass every decade. The losses accelerate after 65. We call this sarcopenia, and it is the slow biological story behind a great deal of what feels like normal aging. The heavier knees in the morning, the slower rise from the couch, the wobbly first step after sitting too long. Most people assume the answer is more protein during the day, and they are not wrong. But they are missing the harder half of the problem. After 60, your muscle cells stop responding to protein the way they once did. Picture the protein receptors on your muscle as electrical sockets in a house lived in for 60 years. The plug still goes in. The current still flows. But the connection has loosened. The same protein no longer delivers the same charge. Researchers call this anabolic resistance. This is why the night matters. The deepest stage of sleep, slow-wave sleep, is when growth hormone peaks and muscle protein synthesis is most active. If your bloodstream is empty of amino acids during that window, your body pulls what it needs from the muscle you already have. You break down today the muscle you spent yesterday building. 7 to 8 grams of protein in 2 tablespoons of peanut butter is not a huge amount on its own. But at night, when the body is repairing and looking for a steady amino acid supply, even a modest dose makes a measurable difference. A 2026 trial from Deakin University called the COIN study, published in the Journal of Cachexia, Sarcopenia, and Muscle, followed 120 older adults between 66 and 89, all at risk of falls. Half ate 43 grams of natural peanut butter every day for 6 months. The other half kept their usual diet. At the end, the peanut butter group completed the 5-time sit-to-stand test significantly faster, a direct measure of lower body muscle power. Stronger legs after 60 is not vanity. It is the line between getting out of a chair on your own and needing help. Peanut butter alone will not replace strength training, but it gives the rest of your effort something solid to stand on. If peanut butter can do all of this, why do some people eat it every night and still see their A1C climb? Because they are eating the wrong jar. And that wrong jar may be sitting in your kitchen right now. Walk down the peanut butter aisle of any large supermarket and you will see dozens of brands. An environmental working group review of the most popular ones found that the majority contain added sugars, hydrogenated oils, or both. Most of the loud, familiar names on the shelf are not actually peanut butter the way your grandmother would have recognized it. They are processed food products with peanut butter as one ingredient among 5 or 6 others. And those other ingredients are the reason an honest-looking bedtime snack can quietly undo everything we just discussed. 5 ingredients on a peanut butter label deserve your attention. The first is hydrogenated oil, sometimes written as partially hydrogenated. This is how trans fat gets back into food. Even when the label says 0 grams, the FDA allows up to half a gram per serving to be rounded down. Trans fat raises LDL, lowers HDL, and feeds the inflammation the healthy fats in real peanut butter are supposed to calm. The second is added sugar, listed as cane sugar, dextrose, corn syrup, or evaporated cane juice. Some popular brands carry 3 to 4 grams of added sugar per 2 tablespoons, enough to wipe out the low glycemic benefit and feed the dawn phenomenon instead of blunting it. The third is mono and diglycerides, emulsifiers that can carry trace trans fats and are now being studied for longer-term health concerns. The fourth is excessive sodium, anything above 140 milligrams per 2 tablespoons. Too much sodium at night blunts the natural dip in your blood pressure during sleep, a dip that quietly protects your heart. The fifth is palm oil, added to keep the spread smooth. It is heavy in saturated fat and crowds out the unsaturated fat that gave peanut butter its reputation in the first place. One variation is, in my view, the worst of all: reduced fat peanut butter. The manufacturer removes the healthy fat that makes peanut butter useful and refills the jar with sugar and starch. A 2-second rule will protect you. Put your finger on the ingredient list and count. If the list goes beyond 2 words, peanuts and salt, leave it on the shelf. And do not be alarmed when natural peanut butter has a layer of oil on top. That is not a defect. That is proof you are holding real food. Lawrence, 72, came back 4 months after we first talked about peanut butter. His A1C had gone up. "Doctor," he said, "I did exactly what you told me." I asked him to show me the jar. He pulled out his phone, a brand with 8 ingredients, sugar listed third. "I thought peanut butter was peanut butter," he said quietly. We read the label together. He bought a different jar that weekend, and 6 weeks later, his A1C started to come down again. The last question is the most practical one. How much, when, and with what? 1 to 2 tablespoons of natural peanut butter, somewhere between 16 and 32 grams, eaten 30 to 60 minutes before you lie down. That window matters. Too close to bed, and the high-fat content can encourage acid reflux. Too far before bed, and the steady release of energy will not align with your overnight glucose curve. Stick with 1 tablespoon if you are pairing it with fruit or whole grain bread. Use 2 tablespoons if you are eating it on its own. More is not better. Going beyond 2 does not deepen the benefit and only adds unnecessary calories. 3 combinations work especially well after 60. The first is half an apple, sliced, with 1 tablespoon of peanut butter on the slices. The pectin feeds your gut bacteria. The natural sugar in the apple is buffered by the protein and fat in the peanut butter, so there is no glucose spike. This is the one I recommend most for patients managing weight. The second is 1 slice of whole grain bread, lightly toasted, with 1 to 2 tablespoons of peanut butter. The complex carbohydrates trigger the gentle insulin pulse we discussed, the one that helps tryptophan into your brain more efficiently. This option is for someone whose main complaint is trouble falling asleep. The third is 2 tablespoons of peanut butter with a teaspoon of chia seeds stirred in. The chia adds soluble fiber and a small dose of omega-3 fat, slowing digestion further. This works well for someone on a tighter calorie plan. Consistency matters more than perfection. 4 to 5 nights a week for 4 to 6 weeks is the realistic window where steadier blood sugar, fewer middle-of-the-night awakenings, and clearer mornings begin to show. A few people should be careful before making this routine. If you have a peanut allergy, this is not for you. Almond butter or sunflower seed butter are reasonable substitutes. If you live with acid reflux or GERD, start with a teaspoon and watch your symptoms. If you take insulin, glipizide, glyburide, or any sulfonylurea, please talk to your doctor before adding a bedtime snack, because the timing of your medication may need adjustment. And if you are in a strict calorie deficit, simply count the 100 to 200 extra calories into your daily total. A 2024 meta-analysis pooling 113 randomized trials and over 8,000 adults found that regular nut consumption at this kind of dose lowered total cholesterol and LDL without harming HDL. Strong evidence that peanut butter at the recommended amount is safe to keep up long-term. This is not a magic food. It is one careful piece of a bigger picture that includes daily walking, balanced meals, and good sleep hygiene. When those pieces stack together, the effect compounds quietly in your favor. Your body between midnight and sunrise is doing the most important repair work of your day. It is steadying your blood sugar, rebuilding muscle you used yesterday, washing out the chemical residue from your thoughts. A single spoonful of the right peanut butter, eaten the right way, can sit alongside that work and quietly support every part of it. The question was never whether to eat peanut butter before bed. The question was always which jar and how. 3 small actions for the week ahead. Tonight, try 1 tablespoon of natural peanut butter on half an apple, 30 to 45 minutes before you lie down. Notice how you sleep. Tomorrow morning, walk to your pantry, take out your current jar of peanut butter, and read the ingredient list. If you count more than 2 ingredients, put it on your grocery list for replacement. Over the next 7 nights, write down the time of any middle-of-the-night awakenings and your morning energy on a scale of 1 to 10. Numbers tell the truth that memory forgets. At your next appointment, ask your doctor one question. Given my current morning blood sugar, would a small protein and fat snack before bed make sense for me? Also ask whether your serum magnesium has ever been checked, especially if you take a daily acid reducer or a water pill. What is the brand of peanut butter in your kitchen right now, and how many ingredients are on the label? Type the brand and the number below. If you plan to try this tonight, type tonight. And if you have a friend over 60 who wakes with morning sugar they cannot explain, please send them this video. The right information in the right hands can change a life. I am Dr. Claire Whitmore. I want to see you sleeping deeply, waking clear-headed, and walking into these years feeling like yourself. What I shared today is for education, not a replacement for the doctor who knows your particular body, because every body is its own story. Please do not stop or adjust any medication for diabetes, blood pressure, or anything else without speaking to your prescriber first. If this conversation belongs in your life, subscribe so we can keep these talks going. Sleep well tonight. There's a cracker sitting in millions of kitchens right now that scores an 85 on the glycemic index. In plain terms, that's higher than many candies, and dangerously close to eating spoonfuls of pure glucose. And the cruel irony? It's the cracker most people over 60 choose precisely because they believe it's the light, healthy option. If you're managing blood sugar, prediabetes, or type 2 diabetes, the cracker aisle can feel like a trap. One box says whole grain, another sugar-free, a third gluten-free, and yet your numbers still creep up after that afternoon snack. Those words on the front of the box were never meant to protect your blood sugar. They were meant to sell. Today I'm giving you the 5 best crackers for blood sugar and type 2 diabetes by exact brand name, the ones I'd feel good seeing in your pantry, and the 3 worst that quietly work against you. We'll count the good ones together, 1 through 5, and the 5th may surprise you most. And that cracker scoring an 85? You'll find out exactly which one it is before we're done. Stay with me to the end. Before we get into it, do me a quick favor. Tell me in the comments which cracker you keep in your kitchen right now, the one you reach for in the afternoon. Just the name is enough. I'm asking because you might be surprised whether it lands on today's good list or the one to avoid. And if you'd like more trustworthy, no-nonsense guidance on keeping your blood sugar steady after 60, subscribe and stay close. That's what I'm here for. So, let me clear something up that confuses almost everyone. The problem was never the cracker itself. It's what the cracker is made of, the flour and the fiber. That's why 2 crackers that look identical, sitting side by side on the same shelf, can do completely opposite things inside your body. Here's what happens. When a cracker is built from refined flour, your gut breaks it down into simple sugar within minutes. There's no fiber, no protein to slow things down, no speed bump on the road. So the sugar floods in fast, your blood sugar spikes, and then it crashes just as hard. That crash is what leaves you tired an hour later, reaching for another snack you didn't plan on eating. Now, this isn't just my opinion. A clinical trial, registered under the identifier NCT 05702-372, tested crackers that all contained the same 50 grams of carbohydrate, same carb load, different flour. The cracker made from sunflower seed flour scored a glycemic index of 53. Whole wheat came in at 77. And the one made from refined flour, it hit 90 dwarfs, nearly double the impact of the seed cracker from foods that looked almost the same on the plate. Let me tell you about Margaret. She's 68, and she is careful, genuinely careful, about what she eats. But her morning numbers wouldn't budge. Month after month, the same stubborn reading. She kept a snack in her pantry she trusted more than anything else, something she was certain was the lightest, healthiest choice in the house. Her granddaughter had once told her it was the diet kind, and that was good enough for Margaret. I'll tell you exactly what it was later, but I think a few of you already keep the same box. So, before we get to the brands, I want to hand you a tool. Call it your label filter. 4 things to check every single time you turn a box over. First, the very first ingredient should be a seed or a whole grain. Not enriched flour, not wheat flour. Those are the refined kind dressed up in friendly words. Second, at least 3 grams of fiber per serving. Third, 0 added sugar. And fourth, this one matters especially after 60 pounds low sodium because your heart and your kidneys are carrying enough already. Keep those 4 in your back pocket, because once you can read a box this way, you stop trusting the front of the package and start trusting the truth on the back. And that's where we're headed. 5 crackers that pass this test, starting with the easiest one to find. Let's start with number 1, and I picked this one first on purpose because it's the easiest swap you can make. You can find it in nearly every grocery store across the country, sitting right there on the regular shelf. No specialty aisle, no health food store. It's Triscuit Original. Turn the box over and read that ingredient list because it's refreshingly short. Whole grain wheat, oil, and sea salt. That's it. 3 ingredients. You get 3 grams of fiber and only about half a gram of sugar per serving, and its glycemic index lands in the moderate range, somewhere around 50 to 55. Compare that to the refined cracker that hit 90, and you can already see the difference that first ingredient makes. And here's why that first ingredient matters so much. When 100% whole grain leads the list, the fiber is still intact, and fiber is what slows the whole digestion process down, so the sugar trickles in instead of flooding. This isn't a small effect either. One large analysis pooling data from over 463,000 people found that the highest whole grain intake was tied to a 21% lower risk of type 2 diabetes. For every 50 grams a day, the risk dropped by 23%. That's the quiet power of choosing the whole grain version. One practical word on the shelf, though. Reach for the original or the hint of salt version. The flavored ones, the ones coated in seasonings, often carry more sugar and more sodium than you'd expect. And don't be fooled by the thin crisps sitting next to them. Despite the name, they don't share the same clean profile. Stick with the plain box. It's doing more for you than the fancier ones beside it. Now for number 2, and this one steps things up. If you're dealing with prediabetes or type 2, this is the group with the strongest evidence behind it. Because it doesn't just keep your blood sugar low, it actually asks less of your pancreas. I'm talking about whole grain rye crisp bread, and the brand to look for is Wasa. Reach for the whole grain, fiber, or light rye versions. You'll get around 3 grams of fiber, about half a gram of sugar, and notably low sodium. Somewhere near 85 milligrams a serving, which matters more than ever after 60. And Wasa isn't your only option here. Revita and Sigdal sit in the same family, same kind of dense, honest rye crisp bread, same benefits. Here's what makes rye special. Research out of Lund University in Sweden found that whole grain rye crisp bread left people feeling fuller and produced a lower insulin response after eating than crackers made from refined wheat. And whole rye kernels themselves? A glycemic index of just 48. So what does that actually mean for you day to day? 2 things. Feeling fuller longer means you're far less likely to drift back to the pantry for that afternoon nibble. And a lower insulin response means fewer of those blood sugar roller coasters. The steep climbs and stomach-dropping falls that leave you foggy and drained. One last tip. Rye crisp bread is firm, almost sturdy. That's not a flaw. It makes it the perfect base to build on, which is exactly what we'll get into a little later. For now, just know that this is one of the most pancreas-friendly choices you can put in your cart. Quick question for you before we go on, and be honest with me here. When you eat your crackers, how do you actually eat them? Do you nibble them plain, straight out of the box, or do you pair them with something? Drop it in the comments, because how you eat them turns out to matter just as much as which ones you choose, and I'll show you exactly why a little later. On to number 3. This one's for anyone who's sensitive to gluten, or who simply wants a break from wheat. And it comes backed by the very trial I mentioned at the start. The brand is Crunchmaster in the multi-seed or multi-grain variety. What you're getting here is a blend of grains and seeds rather than refined flour, and it's gluten-free. Its glycemic index lands in that comfortable range, roughly 45 to 55. And remember that clinical trial, the one where flour was the only thing that changed? That sunflower seed flour, the one that scored a 53 against refined flour's 90, is exactly this kind of seed-based cracker. It's living proof of the principle we keep coming back to: change the flour, and you change what happens to your blood sugar. The seeds aren't just texture, they're the whole reason the glucose curve flattens out. A couple of practical notes when you're standing in the aisle. Read the label and choose the lower sodium version, because some batches carry more salt than others. And steer clear of the coated flavors. The ranch, the cheese-dusted ones, which tend to come loaded with extra additives you don't need. Who is this really for? If you're over 60 and gluten bothers your stomach, or you're just tired of wheat and want something with a little more variety, this is your cracker. It gives you that satisfying crunch without the refined flour spike, and that's the trade you're always trying to make. So that's 3 down, and we're climbing toward the ones that do the most for your numbers. Number 4 takes us somewhere a little different, into lower carb territory, with a benefit your heart will thank you for. Number 4 is where we drop into genuinely lower carb territory. And this matters especially if, like so many people after 60, you're watching your heart as closely as your blood sugar. The brand is Simple Mills almond flour crackers. These are built from a blend of almond flour, sunflower seeds, and flax, and that combination does double duty. Almonds bring vitamin E and the kind of monounsaturated fat that's good for your heart, while the flax adds a dose of omega-3. So you're not just dodging a sugar spike, you're feeding your cardiovascular system at the same time. But let me be straight with you about the numbers, because I won't oversell this one. A 30-gram serving runs about 150 calories with 18 grams of carbohydrate, 8 grams of fat, and 3 grams of protein. So no ways, this is not a super low-carb cracker. You still need to mind your portion. What works in your favor is that the fat and the protein blunt the impact, so the blood sugar response stays gentle even with those carbs in there. It's about the whole package, not just one number. And here's the trap I want you to sidestep with this one. These are gluten-free, and gluten-free has somehow become a health halo. People see those words and assume it's automatically better for them. It isn't. Gluten-free can still be refined starch dressed up nicely. The reason Simple Mills earns a spot on this list has nothing to do with that label. It earns it because it's built from nuts and seeds. The flour is the hero here, not the marketing on the front of the box. And now we reach number 5, the one I promised might surprise you most. Because when most people picture the best cracker for blood sugar, this is not what comes to mind. But pound for pound, it's the strongest performer on this entire list. I'm talking about flaxseed crackers. Flackers is the brand, with Mary's Gone crackers as the easier to find runner-up. Here's why Flackers earn the crown. A serving size about 8 crackers gives you roughly 10 grams of carbohydrate. But look closer. 9 of those grams are fiber, and you're getting 6 grams of protein on top. Subtract the fiber, and the carbohydrate that actually moves your blood sugar is almost nothing. That's about as friendly a number as a cracker can give you. And if Flackers are hard to find near you, Mary's Gone crackers, made from brown rice, quinoa, flax, and sesame, with 3 grams of fiber, organic, and gluten-free, is the one you'll spot on more shelves. Let me put that fiber in perspective because it's remarkable. 1 serving of Flackers delivers more than 1/3 of your entire fiber needs for the day. And fiber isn't a minor detail for people in your situation. A study published in PLOS Medicine found that among people with diabetes, raising fiber intake from 19 grams a day up to 35 was linked to 14 fewer deaths per 1,000 people. That's the kind of number that should make you look twice. The mechanism behind all this comes down to a ratio, protein to carbohydrate. The sweet spot is roughly 1 gram of protein for every 2 grams of carb or less, and these crackers hit it. That ratio is why the sugar climbs slowly, why you stay full, why things hold steady. One honest everyday word of caution though. Flaxseed is rich in oil, and oil goes rancid. So once you open the box, keep it in the refrigerator. A small thing, but it's the difference between a cracker that helps you and one that's quietly gone off in the cupboard. Now here's something I need you to hear, because it changes everything. Even the best cracker on that list, even the Flackers, even the rye, can spike your blood sugar if you eat it the wrong way. The cracker is only half the equation. How you eat it is the other half. And there are 3 levers in your control: what you pair it with, how much you eat, and when you eat it. Let's start with the golden rule, the one I want you to tattoo on your memory. Never eat a naked carb. Never eat crackers alone. Always pair them with protein or a healthy fat. A slice of cheese, a spoon of unsweetened nut butter, hummus, a little mashed avocado. That partner slows your digestion down and shaves the top right off the sugar peak. The same cracker, eaten with cheese instead of bare, lands in your bloodstream like a completely different food. Then there's portion. And this is where good intentions quietly fall apart. Most people eat 2, sometimes 3 servings while genuinely believing they've had one. And every time you double the portion, you double the carbs, the sodium, the calories. So don't eat by the handful. Look at the box, find the serving size, and count the actual crackers. It feels almost silly, but it's one of the most powerful things you can do. Timing matters too. Your body is usually more sensitive to insulin in the morning and less so at night, which means a high glycemic cracker eaten late in the evening spikes you harder than the same cracker at breakfast. So if you do snack after dark, that's exactly when pairing with protein becomes non-negotiable. And there's one more thing that matters enormously after 60 hours: sodium. The FDA's standard for low sodium is under 140 milligrams per serving. The American Heart Association recommends staying under 2,300 milligrams a day, and ideally under 1,500 if you've got high blood pressure. If you're older with blood pressure or kidney concerns, you're in the high-risk group, which means a cracker that's wonderful for your sugar, but loaded with salt is still working against you. So let me hand you back that label filter, because it cuts through all 4 of the big marketing traps. Whole grain on the front, while white flour leads the ingredients. Sugar-free, that still turns to sugar because it's white flour. Gluten-free, that's just refined starch. Lightly sweetened, which is still added sugar wearing a softer name. Read the back. Always the back. So, we've covered what to put in your cart. Now let me show you what to leave on the shelf. The 3 crackers quietly working against you. And I'm counting these down from bad to worst, because the worst one is the very cracker so many people believe is the healthiest thing in their kitchen. Coming in at number 3, Ritz and the buttery snack crackers like them. Flip one over and the first ingredient is enriched refined flour, followed by sugar, high fructose corn syrup, and palm oil. Fiber? Almost none. Under a gram. Its glycemic index sits around 70, which means your body handles it about the same as it would handle sugar. And watch for the trap on some boxes that say, baked with whole wheat. Read carefully. The refined flour still comes first on the list. The whole wheat is only second, riding along for the marketing. Number 2, the saltine, the plain soda cracker, white refined flour, a glycemic index around 72, and virtually no fiber to slow any of it down. One serving hits your blood sugar about the same as 2 slices of white bread. I'll give you a quick honorable mention here too, wheat thins. They wear the whole grain label proudly, but they also carry refined canola oil and several forms of added sugar, around 4 grams of added sugar per serving. Not the friend the box pretends to be. And now, the worst of them all, number 1. Rice crackers and rice cakes. This is the cracker from the very start of our time together, the one scoring an 85 on the glycemic index. Its glycemic load runs around 65 per 100 grams, the fiber is minimal, and the sodium is often high. Large population studies have linked white rice to a higher risk of type 2 diabetes. And here's the cruel paradox. People choose it precisely because it looks so light, so airy, so harmless. That lightness is exactly the problem. There's nothing in it to slow the sugar down. And that brings us back to Margaret. This was her snack, the one her granddaughter called the diet kind. The box she trusted more than anything else in her pantry was a stack of rice cakes. And every afternoon, it was quietly undoing all her careful work everywhere else. When she finally swapped it for seed and rye crackers, started pairing them with a little protein, and watched her portions, her morning numbers began to move. Not overnight, not some miracle reversal, but after months of being stuck, that stubborn reading finally started inching in the right direction for the first time. Because she'd found the one thing that had been hiding in plain sight. So, let's bring this home. I want you to walk away with one idea fixed in your mind. The cracker was never your enemy. It never was. What decides whether that snack helps you or harms you isn't the shape or the brand on the front. It's the flour it's built from and the fiber it carries. That's the whole secret. And Margaret's story shows you how much a small change on a grocery shelf can really mean. One swap, one careful look at the back of a box, and months of being stuck finally gave way. You can see the trap now, and once you can see it, you're no longer caught in it. So, here's exactly where to start. 5 simple things, and you can begin this week. First, turn the box over and read that very first ingredient. It has to be a seed or a whole grain, not enriched flour wearing a friendly name. Second, look for at least 3 grams of fiber and 0 added sugar. And while you're there, check that sodium sits under 140 milligrams a serving. Third, on your next trip to the store, replace what you're using now with one of the 5 brands we covered, and if you want the easiest place to begin, reach for Triscuit or Wassa. Fourth, never eat a cracker naked, always pair it with protein or a healthy fat. And fifth, count your crackers by the serving on the label instead of eating by the handful, and if you tend to snack late, lean on the seed-based ones and pair them with protein. One more thing worth doing. At your next visit, ask your doctor a simple, friendly question. Given my current numbers, how many carbs should I aim for in a snack? It's a good conversation to have together. Now, I'd love to hear from you. Of those 5 good crackers we went through today, which one are you going to try first on your next shopping trip? Tell me in the comments. I'm curious which one calls to you. And if someone you love is over 60, managing their blood sugar, and still has a stack of rice crackers or saltines sitting in their kitchen, send them this video. It might be the small nudge that helps them see what Margaret finally saw. I'm Dr. Claire Whitmore. I want you to remember that everything we talked about today is here to help you understand your own body and make informed choices. It's not a replacement for the doctor who knows your history. And please, never stop or change a medication on your own without talking to the doctor treating you first. That part matters deeply. Take good care of yourself, keep reading those labels, and if this helped you, subscribe and stay with me. I'll see you in the next one. A major study from the Cleveland Clinic, published in the journal Nature Medicine, found that people with high blood levels of one extremely common sugar substitute were nearly twice as likely to have a heart attack or stroke within 3 years. And here's the unsettling part. That same sweetener may be hiding right now in the stevia or monk fruit you reach for. The one you thought was the safe choice. I know how that lands. Because for you, this isn't theory. It's the little packet you stir into your morning coffee. It's the spoonful you add to your yogurt at lunch. It's that jar in your cupboard with sugar-free printed on the front. The one you bought believing you were finally doing the right thing for your diabetes. And when you're living with type 2 diabetes and you're past 60, your heart and your blood vessels are already carrying more strain than most. So the question of what you sweeten your food with stops being a small detail. It becomes one of the quiet choices that adds up day after day, year after year. In the next few minutes, I'll walk you through the 3 natural sweeteners that genuinely won't spike your blood sugar and the 2 you need to look at far more carefully before you buy them again. And pay close attention to the 3rd one, because it's something almost nobody picks up off the grocery shelf, yet it comes the closest to tasting like real sugar of anything I'm going to show you today. But before I go further, tell me one thing. Right now, what are you using to sweeten your coffee or your tea? Type the name of it in the comments, and if you'd like to stand alongside others past 60 who are working to stay well every single day, subscribe and join us. It only takes a click. Most people I've guided through this arrive believing honey gets a free pass. It feels natural, old-fashioned, wholesome. Surely something that comes straight from a hive can't be treated the same as plain white sugar. I understand why that belief runs so deep. For generations, honey was handed down as the wise choice, the thing your mother reached for, the sweetener that felt closer to a remedy than to candy. But your bloodstream doesn't read labels, and it doesn't care whether something is natural or processed. It only registers how fast that sweetness turns into glucose. White sugar sits at a glycemic index of around 65. Honey lands somewhere between 55 and 70, depending on the jar. In plain terms, both of them pour into your blood almost as quickly as each other. Honey isn't the safer cousin. It's the same problem wearing a prettier coat. And this is why it weighs heavier on you than on someone younger. Picture your pancreas as an engine that's been running too hot for too long. Every time sugar or honey hits your blood, that engine has to fire again, pushing out insulin to clear it away. Inside it are the very cells that make that insulin, and in someone managing type 2 diabetes, they're already stretched thin. Once or twice, that's no real burden. But 3 cups of coffee a day, every single day, becomes a foot pressing the gas pedal over and over on a motor with less and less left to give. That's the real cost. Not one sweet cup, but the relentless repetition of it. Let me put a real number on this, because I think it will stop you cold. 1 teaspoon of sugar in your coffee 3 times a day across a full year comes to more than 2 pounds of pure sugar, and that's from coffee alone. A single spoon of honey in your yogurt each morning adds up to more than 6 pounds of fast-absorbing sugar in a year, slipping into your blood before you've even decided what's for lunch. A teaspoon looks like nothing in the moment. Yet this is so often the hidden reason a person's A1C simply won't come down, even when they're doing everything else right. Minding their plate, taking their walks, following the plan we built together. If both sugar and honey have to step away from the table, then what do you reach for instead without surrendering the sweetness you love? We'll start with the one you've almost certainly heard of, the one already waiting on nearly every grocery shelf. That sweetener is stevia, and it's the first of the 3 I want you to trust. It doesn't come out of a factory vat. It's drawn from the leaves of a small green plant, and people have been pulling sweetness from those leaves for centuries. The part that makes it so useful for you is what happens once it's inside your body, which is almost nothing at all. The compound that gives stevia its sweetness, called ribadioside A, passes straight through you without being broken down for energy. It leaves your body the way it came in. That means a glycemic index of 0 and virtually no calories. It cannot raise your blood sugar because your body never treats it as sugar in the first place. And the science backs this up, not as a hopeful guess, but as a measured result. A review of the research published in 2024 pooled together multiple studies on stevia and looked closely at its effect on blood sugar and on A1C, the number that tells us how your glucose has behaved over the past few months. Stevia held its ground as one of the soundest choices a person with diabetes can make, sitting alongside the other two. I'll show you today in that small group of sweeteners with little to no impact on glucose. This isn't fringe, it's well studied and it holds up. So why do so many people try stevia once and never touch it again? In a word, bitterness. And here's what almost nobody has told them. That bitter aftertaste isn't really stevia's fault, it's a matter of purity, a product rich in clean riboside. A tastes smooth and sweet, while a cheap, crudely extracted version carries that sharp medicinal bite that sends people running back to sugar. There's a second trap too, and it's about how much you use. Stevia is somewhere between 200 and 300 times sweeter than sugar. Let that sink in. A pinch is plenty, and a little past that pinch turns the whole cup bitter in an instant. Think of it like a single drop of food coloring in a tall glass of water. The tiniest amount changes everything, and a heavy hand ruins it. That's why stevia shines in a hot drink but struggles in baking, where it can't quite behave like sugar does. I think of Nancy, 69, a retired school teacher who told me flatly that she'd given up on stevia years ago because her coffee came out tasting like medicine. When I asked how she measured it, the answer said everything. She was scooping it with the same coffee spoon she'd used for sugar for 30 years, a heaping spoonful of something hundreds of times stronger. We switched her to a high-purity riboside A product and a genuinely small pinch, and she came back almost amused, calling the difference night and day. The lesson wasn't that stevia had failed her, it was the wrong kind, in the wrong amount. If stevia still isn't quite to your taste, there's another sweetener with a far gentler flavor and almost no aftertaste at all, and it's the second one worth keeping in your kitchen. That one is monk fruit. You may also see it called luo hanguo, and it carries a long story behind it. Healers in southern China were using this little green melon for close to 1,000 years, long before anyone measured a glycemic index. What they knew by tradition, we can now explain by chemistry. The sweetness in monk fruit comes from natural compounds called mogrosides. And like the riboside in stevia, your body simply doesn't process them. They move through and leave without being turned into fuel. So once again you get sweetness with no glucose response, no insulin spike, no sugar, no calories, and no carbohydrates to count. For someone watching their blood sugar, that's about as clean as a sweetener gets. Monk fruit is intensely sweet, somewhere between 100 and 250 times sweeter than sugar, so the same rule from a moment ago still applies. You need only a whisper of it. Where it tends to win people over is the taste. Many who could never make peace with the bitter edge of stevia find monk fruit far easier to live with, smoother and rounder, especially in coffee, in tea, in a morning smoothie. If stevia and monk fruit were the only two choices, plenty of my patients would land here simply because it goes down without a fight. But I want to plant a small flag right here, because there's something about the monk fruit sitting on your grocery shelf that matters more than you'd think, and I'm going to come back to it near the end of this video. What's printed in big letters on the front of that package is not always what's actually doing the sweetening inside it. Hold that thought, because it changes how you shop. For now, just know that monk fruit earns its place as the second of the three I trust. So before I hand you the third, the one hardly anyone has ever tried, let me ask you something. What's sitting in your kitchen cupboard at this very moment? Is it stevia, monk fruit, or some other sugar-free product you picked up somewhere along the way? Type it down in the comments. I'd love to know what you're actually working with. The third sweetener is allulose, and I'd wager most of you have never once reached for it. That's a shame, because in some ways it's the most remarkable of the three. Allulose is what scientists call a rare sugar. It occurs in nature, in small amounts, in figs, in raisins, in maple syrup. And yet your body handles it in a completely different way from regular sugar. Here's the part that surprises people most. It tastes like sugar. Not a clever imitation, not close, but not quite. It carries about 70% of the sweetness of table sugar, with the same clean, familiar taste, and none of the bitter edge that trips people up with stevia. For anyone who's tried every substitute and quietly missed the honest taste of sugar, allulose is often the one that finally feels right. But taste is only where it starts. What makes allulose genuinely exciting for someone with diabetes is how it behaves inside you. It carries almost no calories and has practically no effect on your blood sugar. Human studies have shown that when people eat a meal alongside allulose, their blood sugar and insulin response can actually come down. And that effect shows up most clearly in people who are pre-diabetic or already living with type 2 diabetes. One way it seems to do this is by nudging your body to release a hormone called GLP-1, which helps govern how you handle glucose. Now, I want to be careful here. Allulose is not a medication, and I'm not asking you to treat it like one. But it's worth knowing that GLP-1 is the very same pathway some of the newest diabetes drugs are built around. And here's a simple sweetener that leans in that same gentle direction. A study published in 2021 in BMJ Open Diabetes Research and Care looked at exactly this, tracking how glucose and insulin responded after a sugar load when allulose was in the mix. The findings pointed the same way, a measurable, helpful nudge rather than a spike. Allulose has also been studied for its effect on body weight, with some research suggesting it can support fat loss and a healthier body composition over time. I won't oversell that. But for many of you managing weight right alongside blood sugar, it's a welcome bonus. On the practical side, allulose has one advantage the others simply don't. It bakes beautifully. It browns and caramelizes much the way sugar does, which makes it the one I'd steer you toward for a recipe, the very job people so often hand to the wrong sweetener. I do owe you an honest word of caution. Allulose is newer to the shelf than the others, so we have less long-term data on it, and in larger amounts, it can unsettle some stomachs. Start small and let your body adjust. I'm thinking of Raymond, 72, who had tried what felt like a dozen sweeteners and been let down by everyone. He actually kept a little graveyard of half-used jars in the back of a kitchen drawer. The first morning he stirred allulose into his coffee, he said it was the first time he forgot he was even using a substitute. A few weeks on, he mentioned something he hadn't expected. He was reaching for his afternoon snacks far less often. No miracle. Just the right sweetener, finally meeting the right person. That's the three I trust. But just as important are two sweeteners hiding in nearly every product stamped sugar-free. And I want you to start seeing them with very different eyes. The first of the two is erythritol, and for years it was treated as something close to a perfect sugar substitute. It barely registers on your blood sugar, and on that count alone it earned a spot in countless diabetic-friendly products. But the picture has grown more complicated. That Cleveland Clinic research I opened with, published in Nature Medicine in 2023, examined thousands of people and found that those with high levels of erythritol in their blood were close to twice as likely to suffer a major cardiac event, a heart attack or a stroke, over the next 3 years. The same team went further. They had healthy volunteers drink a beverage sweetened with erythritol and watched what happened in the bloodstream afterward, publishing that work in 2024. What they saw was that the platelets, the tiny cells that form clots, became more active and more prone to clumping. In plainer language, the blood became a little quicker to clot than it ought to be. The second is xylitol, and it sits under a similar cloud. In June of 2024, the European Heart Journal published findings that xylitol, too, appears to encourage clotting and is associated with raised cardiovascular risk. And there's one more thing about xylitol you need to know if there's a dog in your home. It is severely toxic to dogs, even in tiny amounts. Keep it stored as carefully as you would your medications. Now I have to slow down and be very fair with you, because how you hold this information matters as much as the information itself. These studies show an association, a link. They have not proven that eating these sweeteners directly causes heart attacks. There's a real complication worth understanding. Your own body actually produces small amounts of erythritol on its own as part of normal metabolism. So a high level in the blood might be a sign of an underlying metabolic problem rather than simply the result of what someone ate. That distinction is genuinely important. And it's worth saying plainly that the FDA still classifies erythritol as safe. So, I'm not standing here telling you these sweeteners will harm you. I'm telling you the signal is strong enough to deserve your caution. So let me be clear about what I'm actually asking. I'm not telling you to throw these out of your house in a panic, and I'm not telling you they're poison. What I'm asking is that you use them thoughtfully, with your eyes open. And that if you already live with heart disease or carry a high risk for it, you bring this up with your own doctor before making erythritol or xylitol a daily habit. For someone in your position, that one conversation is worth having. And here is what makes all of this far more urgent than it might first appear. These two sweeteners I've just asked you to be cautious with may be hiding inside the very stevia or monk fruit you thought was your safe, trustworthy choice. Let me show you how that actually happens, because it's the trap I see catch the most well-meaning people. You walk down the aisle, you spot a package that says stevia or monk fruit in big, reassuring letters on the front, and you drop it in your cart feeling good about the choice. But turn that package over and read the ingredient list, and you'll often find something else listed first: erythritol. Many of these products use it as a filler, a bulking agent that gives the sweetener the volume and the spoonable texture of real sugar, since a true pinch of pure monk fruit is so tiny it's hard to handle. Monk fruit in particular is very frequently blended with erythritol for exactly this reason. So you end up with this strange situation. The thing you believed was the number one choice on my list turns out to be mostly the very thing I just asked you to be careful with. That is precisely why you have to flip the package over and read the back before you buy it, not after. There's a close cousin to this mistake, and it walked right out of the comments on a video like this one. Someone proudly mentioned they'd switched to monk fruit blended with Splenda. Here's the catch. Splenda is sucralose, an artificial sweetener, not a natural one. And it's exactly the kind of thing we're trying to move away from. The World Health Organization issued guidance in 2023 advising against relying on these non-sugar sweeteners for long-term weight control. For someone like you, focused on protecting your metabolic health for years to come, the natural options are simply the steadier ground to stand on. The next mistake is treating the words sugar-free as permission to eat freely. A cookie can be sweetened with the cleanest sweetener on earth and still be built on refined white flour, modified starch, and hydrogenated oil, all of which act on your blood sugar and your body in their own right. The right sweetener inside the wrong food doesn't rescue it. Read the whole nutrition label, not just the line for sugar. And the last one is the quietest of all, the one I'd call psychological compensation. You make a genuinely good swap, clean sweetener in your coffee, real discipline, and then, without quite noticing, you let that small victory hand you permission elsewhere. A bigger dessert on the weekend, an extra snack in the afternoon, a little reward because surely you've earned it, and that quiet bargaining can erase the entire benefit of the good choice you made. I watched both of these tangle together in one person. Barbara, 65, came in pleased that she'd moved to monk fruit, genuinely puzzled that her A1C hadn't budged an inch. We turned her package over together and found it was mostly erythritol. And along the way, it came out that she'd been treating herself a little more generously, certain she'd already done the hard part. 2 mistakes stacked inside a single jar. So how do you take everything we've covered and put it to work, starting with your very next trip to the store? Let me gather it into a few clear steps you can actually follow. Here's what I hope you'll carry out of this. You do not have to give up sweetness to take care of your blood sugar. You have 3 sweeteners you can genuinely trust: stevia, monk fruit, and allulose, and 2 that deserve a far more careful eye: erythritol and xylitol. But the real win was never about finding cleverer ways to keep eating sweet things all day long. It's about meeting the honest, everyday want: the morning coffee, the yogurt at lunch, in a way that stops working against everything else you're doing so faithfully to stay well. So let me leave you with a few simple steps. First, before anything goes in your cart, turn the package over and read the back. If erythritol or sucralose is leading the ingredient list, set it down and look for a purer version. Second, match the sweetener to the job. For your daily coffee or tea, reach for a high-purity stevia or monk fruit and use only a pinch. For baking, allulose is your friend. Third, a practical heads up. Allulose is harder to find on ordinary grocery shelves than the others, so you'll likely have the most luck ordering it online or checking a health food store. Fourth, if you live with heart disease or carry a high risk for it, ask your own doctor how they feel about you using erythritol and xylitol regularly. And last, don't let the words sugar-free become a quiet permission slip to eat more elsewhere. Now I'd love to hear from you. Of these 3, which one are you going to try first? And what surprised you the most today? And if someone you love is living with diabetes and still reaching for sugar or honey, or trusting that anything labeled sugar-free must be safe, send them this video. That small share might change the way they shop tomorrow morning. I'm Dr. Claire Whitmore. I want to see you healthy, steady, and enjoying your coffee without a shadow of worry hanging over it. Everything I've shared today is here to teach and to guide you, never to replace the doctor who knows you and your history. And please hear me on this one. Never stop or change any medication on your own without speaking to the doctor treating you first. Take gentle care of yourself, keep choosing well in these small daily moments,